All right. This month is brought to you by the number 20. That's how many hours it took a threat actor to go from notification of a misconfiguration in LangFlow to the weaponization and exploitation.
And the word supply chain, because March was full of research threats against trusted tools becoming attack surfaces. We're going to talk about LangFlow and Trivy and more.
I'm Conor Sherman.
And I'm Crystal Morin.
This is the Future of Threats.
And welcome to our show.
So we are absolutely excited to have everybody here. This is the first time that we are doing this. And we want to walk you through what the threat research team has been doing here at Sysdig. This was an idea that came out of RSA. We had a standing room only event where we talked about how threat actors are adopting AI, how that's changing the landscape for defenders and leaders across the board. And we all had this incredible corpus of work being put out by the threat research team. And so we thought, what better way to do this than to go live and let's talk about what's actually happening. So with that, Crystal, why don't you walk us through do you want to give us a quick summary of the headlines, or do you want me to?
Yeah, sure, I can. So this is some of the research that was published in the March security briefing just a couple days ago. First and foremost, 20 hours for exploitation for LangFlow, AI workflow, RCE. There was no POC published when this started happening. We'll dig into it a little bit more, but 20 hours from publication of a CVE to when we started watching active exploits. That next one, 1,000 plus environments compromised. That has to do with the Trivy exploit. I'm sure you all have seen it at this point, but that has cascaded down into several other organizations. Lots of credentials stolen, source code stolen, and we'll get into that as well. There's 2 new CVEs for our beloved Ingress Engine X. We'll dig into that also. They seem to be getting berated, unfortunately. It's a popular project, so of course the threat actors are going to go for it. 2 more CVEs for them. And then finally, there is some research and educational piece from the threat research team about protecting coding agents, and also a fun little project that came out from Falco recently that's related. We'll get into that.
And I really want to talk about this. So for everyone who's listening to this, we do want to make sure you're grounded in how the threat actors using AI, what the state of play is, but we're also going to talk about some of the new technologies that are coming out to help defenders win at this. That's coming from the open source community. So stay tuned for that piece, because I got to show this to a room of 15 CISOs at RSA, and everyone, I was like, oh, we get it. So it's cool. So we'll get there in a second. All right. So let's dive into the very first one here. So let me give you my hot take on this, and then Crystal, I'd love to get your perspective in here as well. So here's why I think this is really important. So the threat research team published in some research in the month of March here, where they demonstrated how LangFlow had gone from a published advisory on GitHub to then watching adversaries go from that publication to the creation of exploits, the weaponization of the exploits, and then successfully compromising environments. And they did this in under 20 hours. Now, I think this is important for a couple of reasons. One is that this is just yet again another data point that validates the moment that we're living in, where it's no longer good enough to have a 30-day patch cycle. Because if your threat actor can go from discovery to weaponization to exploitation in 20 hours, you just fundamentally need a different posture. And I've been talking to a handful of CISO friends of mine, and we've all kind of agreed that 2026 is like the watershed year. This is the year we look backwards and we're like, everything changed in 2026 when it came to this particular AI being adopted by adversaries. And for me, this sense of like 20 hours is really important because it's less than a day. And we've always seen the narrative. You just look at the 0-day clock from what Sergey put out with his cohort in the Unprompted conference. We saw it come down from years in 2018 to we're walking steadily down to months and weeks, and now we're firmly in the days and hours category. So Crystal, anything else to add here?
No. So our threat research team saw this vulnerability publication go out. They decided within a couple hours after it was published to stand up a honeypot. Let's see what's going to happen. This LangFlow project has like almost 150,000 stars on GitHub. That's a lot. There's a lot of organizations and a lot of developers using this AI pipeline. So they stood it up, and again, less than 24 hours, and there was an active exploit. Thankfully, it was only just against our honeypot, but that doesn't mean that it's not impacting actual organizations too. And this was incredibly simple. It was a single HTTP request that the attacker needed to make to be able to gain access and then go and exfiltrate keys and credentials from these environments. And they were able to create this exploit. There was no public POC on GitHub. Usually when vulnerabilities have come out, you can start searching around GitHub and, threat research blogs and things like that, and you'll see something published, hey, we figured out how to exploit this vulnerability. There was nothing publicized when we started collecting these attacks. So this was the first attack, the first POC that was seen but not being shared publicly in less than a day. The other thing about this, actually, about 10 minutes ago, the Sysdig threat research team published another blog for a new vulnerability. And hang on, I have something for you with regards to this.
Okay.
Here we go. I think you guys will appreciate this. Okay.
This is fine. This is fine.
There is a new vulnerability that was just published yesterday, and the threat research team did the same thing. They stood up a honeypot to see what would happen, and this vulnerability was exploited in less than 10 hours. So it's an open source Python notebook called Marimo. You can go find our blog. We're going to have the team publish the blog in the chat for you guys as well. But again, a super simple exploit path. And that's 10 hours. So if you didn't see the vulnerability published last night, and this is a smaller project, it's not as, Marimo's not as big. I think there's 20,000 stars or something like that on GitHub. It's not as big as LangFlow, but it is currently being actively exploited.
That is nuts. So for everyone listening to this, you're hearing it, the article got published just 10 minutes ago. This is the state of the moment that we're in. And this is why I think it's just this is why I think this year is different. We're heading into a watershed moment where it's just like, we've had it, like it's happened. And now it comes around, how do you have proactive defense? How do you have an active defense posture versus a passive one where you're waiting for a threat actor to do something and then you're responding to it? This is all about the era of proactive security. By the way, Crystal, I absolutely love that little fire sign there, like the little "this is fine" character. That's great.
Thank you.
All right, so I think it's probably in that same breath, probably worth talking about Project Glasswing that came out this week, because I'll publish some more on this on LinkedIn too. But I think one of the things I wanted to highlight here with Project Glasswing is, if anyone is arriving here and you haven't heard about what this is, let me give you a little bit of backstory, or a little bit of context setting, because again, it really lends itself to the gravity of the moment that we're in. With it, when you looked at LangFlow and then Crystal surprising me with this other Python notebook, because here's what's going on. Anthropic has built the next generation of its model. And what we saw with Opus 4.6, the current model that's available on the market, is you had tenured security researchers showing up on stage at the Unprompted conference and other places saying, this is better at finding vulnerabilities than I have, and I've been finding bugs in software for 20 years. And that was Opus 4.6. The next version's model is Mythos Preview. And what Mythos Preview is it got so good at reasoning, working autonomously, and software engineering as a discipline that by accident, it got really, really good at cybersecurity related disciplines related to software engineering, such as finding bugs. Said differently, finding and weaponizing exploits in really hard places to find bugs. So we're talking about getting into operating systems that have been looked at for the last 20 years. We're talking about looking at the Firefox JavaScript engine and finding 181 different exploits inside there. And so the reason I wanted to highlight this is because Anthropic built this model. It is so good at reasoning through and finding these exploits that they elected to not release it to the public. Instead, what they've done is they've built a consortium of cybersecurity experts, vendors and institutions and pulled them together and said, we're going to give you limited access to this to help you with your research so that you can start to improve the Linux operating system, so that you can improve the basic libraries that are underpinning most of the internet's infrastructure before we release this. And in all of their language around Anthropic, they've said they're not intending to release it because it is so powerful. So we're this really interesting moment where we have created tooling within AI that is too dangerous to release publicly. So I'm encouraged by how Anthropic is handling this. I'm encouraged by the coalition building that's happening, and they're not trying to solve the problem all by themselves. But it is also kind of just in a defining moment for where we are as cybersecurity as a discipline in this moment of AI. I wanted just to show some slides here because love some good slides, show me a good PowerPoint and I'm just gonna get really excited about it. So if you look over on the right-hand side here, this is the Firefox JavaScript shell exploit. And I think what's important here is to highlight, look at the progress of the models. So the far left here is Sonnet 4.6, then it's Opus 4.6, and then it's Mythos preview. You can see how effective it's getting over time. And the purpose of this is not the details, it's just look at the step function difference. Now look on the left-hand side here, you can see how Opus 4.6 in that same shell exploitation in the JavaScript from Firefox, it has successfully done 2 of them. Mythos came in and did 181. You're seeing how in the CyberGym, which is put on by Berkeley, I believe, Opus 4.6 scored 66% success rate in the CyberGym, where Mythos preview is getting it to 83%. So we're getting to the point now where the tools and environments that we've built for testing these models inside a cybersecurity domain, we're quickly running out of runway to test these things because they're just getting that good. So I just wanted to highlight this. I'll be releasing some more, Sysdig's going to be releasing some more about this. But if you're a security leader at this moment, my singular encouragement is 2 things. It is to, 1, go read the full report at red.anthropic.com because you've got to pay attention to the details. Just get beyond the headlines. You've got to go read it. It's a very long article, but the team did very good research work on here. And then 2, start getting make sure that you're getting grounded in how threat actors are using AI. By that, go find the threat research teams, like the Sysdig threat research team, like the others, and make sure that you're digesting these on a daily basis, because it's important as defenders to make sure that our strategies that we're using are actually ready and capable to defend against where the threat actors are at, right? We can't be taking the playbooks from 5-7 years ago and trying to deploy them in this moment. So that's my 2 things. Go read the full report and then start paying attention and in the threat research work that's coming out of Sysdig and other teams, and make that part of your daily diet. Crystal, was there anything else about Mythos that jumped off the page for you?
Yes, I have 2 things. First of all, I love that they integrated US government, private entities, and are giving them access to this so they can go fix these vulnerabilities that were identified before it was publicized, if it ever gets publicized. That just open source sharing ethos is what Sysdig's all about. It's what I'm all about. I came from an intelligence background, so I love seeing the resource sharing amongst all of these organizations. That's the first thing. And then secondly, I'm going to take another perspective on this. Some sunshine and rainbows maybe. We've seen that a lot of vulnerabilities, yes, most of them don't have exploits available. There's a vulnerability, but it cannot be exploited, right? We have prioritization that we focus on. That's something that Sysdig talks a lot about. There's a much smaller portion of vulnerabilities that usually have an exploit that you need to be concerned about. So maybe these aren't all exploitable vulnerabilities, but they did also say that they were able to create some POCs for these ones that they identified. So maybe a lot of this is just noise, but like we just talked about 2 other vulnerabilities that were being exploited within 10 and 20 hours. This is a very real concern. So that's all. Maybe this isn't all bad. That's the other thing too.
I don't know. I love your optimism. I was reading through it and I'm like, no, this is just bad news. The outcomes are bad news, but I love your right to the engagement with the community is good news.
There are 2. I mean, you see exploitations, POCs that are very complex. So even if they say they found tens of thousands of vulnerabilities and more than 50% of them can be exploited, Sometimes an exploit means like having all kinds of different accesses, or you need to be like within an environment. And so even though there's an exploit for a vulnerability, it could be very challenging to actually exploit an environment. Now, again, with attackers using AI as well, I'm sure they can find a way around and work their way into an environment regardless of what the POC may say. But not all exploitations are as easy as the ones that we just previously mentioned. So
yeah, I mean, LangFlow is just a web request.
yes,
Right, that's about as easy as it gets.
Walked right in. Marimo's pretty much the same way.
And I think we're also going to see this. We're going to see more of these one-shot exploits. We're definitely going to see that. We're going to see more of these cyber reasoning systems that get started good at chaining them. And that's kind of one of the things that Anthropic was highlighting, was that Mythos started to be really good at looking at low and moderate severity items and starting chaining them together. So this is the world of defense in depth. This is the world of stop. We have to get beyond just like, oh, is it a critical yes or no? And start looking at things in context and saying, how would a reasoning engine reason their way through to exploit? And this is what I mean by like the defense strategies of 5-7 years ago don't necessarily apply to this moment. There are principles that will carry forward, but we have to change our strategies to meet the moment.
Exactly.
I did want to highlight this before we move on to the next topic here. This is from the Anthropic team here. And this is a good grounding framing of this here. And this is directly from their red team report. We're still figuring it out ourselves. But the best way to be ready for the future is to make the best use of the present, even when the results aren't perfect. And so when I read this, for me, I found this to be validating that the direction that we're heading down is agentic defense. Like we need to be moving in that direction where you have systems that are autonomously ready to do detection response and do vulnerability remediation. And that last bit here, even when the results aren't perfect, is really important. See, this is the courage of leadership. This is us turning a corner and saying, okay, I'm going to lean in on this and do this well. And I think the tool that I would offer out to any security leader who's looking at this moment and trying to say, how do I reconcile the threat actor state, the state of AI, and the state of my security posture? What does this look like? And how do I move towards this agentic defense world? It's going to be around measurement. Historically, we've looked at automatic defenses and said, did you detect the thing? Yes or no? Did you bump the version? Yes or no? And it was very binary. But as you start to have reasoning agents in your defense arsenal, you actually need to change how you measure this. And it starts becoming more quantitative, but you're looking over multiple dimensions. And you're looking at how good is it from first principles reasoning? Does it generate the evidence, and does it reason accordingly from that? Does it create the proper audit trail so that people can, us or our governing agents, can then look at that to make sure that it's following, meeting the same expectations that we'd have of a staff level security engineer? That's the world we're entering to. It's going to be fuzzy, it's going to be non-binary, and it's going to be one where we are going to change our measurements around these defense systems if we're going to be able to confidently lean in on this agentic defense strategy. It's coming. And believe me, it's coming here fast. So, all right, we have a lot more to cover. So let's just jump into the next one here. Crystal, do you want to take the coding agents or...
Yes, I can. So I can explain this. So this first stemmed from a research report that a couple of the folks on the threat research team were working on. They wanted to dig into the risks associated with using AI coding agents, which has been all over the headlines for the last couple months. So what happens when they're running inside your environment actively with minimal oversight? What kind of things can happen? So the blog that they put out in March explains a couple of the different risks that are associated with using AI coding agents. The ones that are executing code, accessing your repositories, interacting and changing your infrastructure. They have high privilege. So how can we make sure that we're detecting when these agents go rogue? There's 4 detections in the blog that are explained for Sysdig secure users, but it's a great educational asset. I highly suggest reading it. Not all of you are Sysdig customers, and that's fine, but you can still read through this and understand the steps that they took to create these detections and secure AI coding agents. and then bring that into your organization if possible as well, if you're also using them. And then from that, I'll let you take this, Connor, but since you were discussing it at RSA, there's a new project from Falco that is associated with this that we have linked here too.
So this is, again, a testament to the open source community that's associated with Sysdig and the community of Falco. So here's the TLDR for this. CISOs and security leaders are looking for opportunities to help CTOs and VPs of engineering accelerate faster, but safely with agentic coding systems. And one of the problems we have is that these agents just kind of do rogue stuff, even when they're not trying to be malicious. So the question is like, how do you have really good real-time guardrails on this? So what the team did is they said, okay, how can we take this real-time engine that we have with Falco and we can make it purpose-built for coding agents? So there's the open source version of this. I have it installed on all my personal systems. And what it does is it says every time Claude or Gemini CLI or OpenAI's Codex goes to invoke a tool or goes to take an action, does a tool call, it will check it. And it will say, hold on a second. Is this malicious or not malicious? Is this suspicious? Is this not suspicious? And it will interrupt it. So you can have it warn you. You can have it automatically block. You can have it log, all those natural configurations you'd expect. So what this means is, as you roll this out across your organization, you have basic fundamental guardrails in place that are extensible. Because it's written in Falco's native language, you can then have your own teams write their own rules and roll them out across your organization, or you can write your own rules and then give this upstream to the community. So right now, when you install it out of the box, it comes with a set of rules that include things like don't read into sensitive directories, like don't go find my keys, don't find those type of things. And then there's a handful of rules that Crystal was just referring to a second ago that come with this. So this is a really good way to start laying down a foundation for putting in guardrails into your coding agents. Obviously, a full security stack would go beyond this, but this is open source. It's free to the community. Anybody can grab this today and start rolling this out across the organization. And as I mentioned, when I showed this to the CISO community at RSA, there were a lot of heads nodding and they're like, okay. And there were 2 points. Not only is this a great tool to solve a problem, it was a good validation that open source has a place for you, has a place in your security strategy today. And the reason I think this is really important to lean in on open source where historically you might not have is because when the moment is changing so fast and threat actors are adapting so quickly, you actually need platforms where you have total visibility of the system and you can create your defensive capabilities to meet the edge cases. So instead of waiting for the vendor cycle to go through, you might have a problem today and you need a solution today. So grab an open source tool, you can modify it and help create those capabilities to handle the edge cases while we wait for the enterprise solution to come along. So this is where I think security leaders can start to open up their aperture. And yes, they will have the vendor relationships they're going to work with and these enterprise grade technologies, but also leveraging open source technologies as part of their integrated stack. So this was hat tip to the whole team here. I love running it on my stack. I get just that much more confidence that my agents aren't going to go do something random and destructive. So yeah, please take a look at the blog, explore it, take a look at the code base, and get exploring with it because it's actually a really good tool set. All right, let's jump into this one. On that note, let's talk about tool chains and how they go bad. Yeah, so, go for it, Crystal.
I'll start with this. So that's the downside of using open source tooling, right? You don't have a vendor that's protecting it and constantly adding patches and watching to make sure that everything's all kosher. It is yours to take care of. When you take that open source project and bring it into your environment, now you need to maintain and protect from anything happening. So that's the unfortunate case with all of the things listed here pretty much. The LangFlow AI pipeline builder tool, like we said, that was a very simple vulnerability that was exploited within 20 hours. Attackers could garner keys and credentials from potentially 100,000 users of this. It's a very popular tool on GitHub. And they don't need credentials to be able to steal your credentials. So they don't need to log in to use this vulnerability. the Trivy check marks. Cisco was impacted by this. Light LLM. There's a handful of other organizations who are actively looking into potentially related breaches. Going into the open source project and supply chain attack, like we said, word of the month of today of this discussion, this is a supply chain issue where they started in one place and they're able to just go downstream and impact all of these other organizations. Cisco, for example, they took some source code for, I believe, one of their AI capabilities, but a lot of the others, it's keys and credentials. So any kind of impact, you need to make sure that those are being rotated, that you go and do a hunt to see if there was any kind of impact or if there's any kind of follow-on. It could be they're taking code or credentials from you, selling them on the dark web, or they could just take access to your environment from a supply chain compromise like this and start installing crypto miners. It doesn't have to be malware or bad, but you can see follow-on impacts like crypto miners from something like this as well. And again, the Ingress Nginx vulnerabilities, there's 2 of them. Those ones in particular, one came out in February and one came out in March, but they're basically sister vulnerabilities. Super simple. It's the addition of a backslash or a double quote into a couple different locations, which destroys the input sanitization of the tool and allows remote code execution. So very simple vulnerability exploitation, again, for that one, and very common open source tool that a lot of people use.
So I wanted to underscore something here that you mentioned, Crystal, with the Trivy and other tools that got compromised here by Team PCP. So what I found really interesting is that when you looked at what this threat actor group was focused on, they were able to string together one compromise to the next, to the next, to the next. And there's 2 things I want to highlight here. Number one is that these tools that are inside our pipelines, these CI/CD pipelines, they tend to run with privileged access. They tend to be given the ability to look at code, to take actions, and again, they are integrated into a really sensitive part of the SDLC, which are these, the CI/CD pipelines. So what does that mean? That means people who are trying to defend against these kind of attacks are actually extending their runtime protections outside of the 4 walls that would traditionally be in their cloud environment. And they're saying, how do I extend this and start to pull in my CI/CD pipelines? Because there's compute happening here, there's execution happening here. And guess what? There's credentials and there's data. It's runtime by another name. And they're taking their runtime agents and they're trying to get them installed and they're working to get them installed in their CI/CD pipelines. And then they're extending them also into their developer tools as well inside their agents. So for me, when I saw this from Team TCP come out, this was another piece that said, okay, the threat actor is doing something that's different. Our security strategies need to change and we need to lean in on this. And one of the small paradigm shifts that's happening is a lot of people are waking up to saying, oh, my CI runners, that's as part of my runtime environment as much as my production Kubernetes cluster. And that's really important to think through. So if you leave this today doing one thing, it's like your runtime environment has extended beyond the 4 walls of the cloud account. It's beyond just the Kubernetes workload. We're seeing it here as well. Because when you have a compromise in a agent or in a tool that's looking at your CI pipelines and it starts to do something malicious, it can look through memory, it can start dumping out credentials. This is what we saw thing with the Team CP. They use those credentials then to move laterally, either to compromise another a tool in pipelines or move on to another customer, so on and so forth. So just think about that for a second. It's like the pipelines are now part of your runtime environment just as much. Cool. Anything else we want to highlight here? Otherwise, we'll jump to the next one.
Yeah, just real quick. CI/CD pipelines, your build pipelines. The threat research team has been reporting on all kinds of weaknesses and attacks and vulnerabilities on those for well over a year now. Before we started integrating agents, I think it was kind of, GitHub Actions was the first step towards a more autonomous pipeline. and they were all over them as soon as it started getting popular. More developers started using GHA. So this is just building upon what we've seen over the last probably 2 years. There's tons of reporting that we have on these kinds of attacks. And it's going to persist because these pipelines are now the keys to the kingdom. And a lot of them, or some of them, are publicly accessible on GitHub. So it's a really easy opportunity for attackers to be able to get into environments for huge enterprise organizations when there is a small mistake at that developer level, and it can spiral out of control.
We have a really good question in the chat when it comes to protecting coding agents. So I want to call that one out and give the requester a quick answer to that question. So the question in the chat here is this is from Matt Kim. How does Falco actually observe the actions the coding agent is taking and distinguish suspicious behavior from normal behavior? This is a great question. So make sure I don't have no slide for this. Yeah. Let's just hang here for a second. So Matt, I just want to say thank you for that. Here's the question. Here's my answer to that. The way the coding agent that we described earlier is working is it's looking at the pre-tool use hook that these agents line up against. So the agents will go to engage a tool to take action. Okay, when they go to take action and it goes to the stack, one of the functions it has to call is the pre-tool use hook, and it hooks in there and uses that. So what we do is at that moment, the request will hit the Sysdig agent, the open source agent. It will look at that. It will then say, does this pattern of activity match the rule sets that have been loaded up? And if the answer is yes, then it is malicious and we block it. If the answer is no, it proceeds, either just logs or warns or takes action. And what's important to know there is that as you start to threat model what the coding agents could be doing in your environment, because it's written in the same Falco rule set, anybody can write these rules. So you might have a particular risk that you want to mitigate with this. You can write out the rule using the standard Falco language. You can save it locally. You can roll it out across your enterprise. That's up for you to decide. But that's the mechanism it is using. It's the pre-tool use hook to inspect the action before the agent can call the tool and take the action. Great question. If you've got more or anyone has questions, please drop them in the chat and we're very happy to answer them as they come along. All right, so we've got the CISO Corner here. This is a topic, this is an addition to the monthly report that Crystal does. So every month, Crystal goes back and looks at all the incredible research put out by the Sysdig threat research team and puts together a roundup article. What's the state of play? What's the novel research that's been coming out? And what do you, as someone, as a practitioner or as a leader right now, need to be knowing about? And that's the monthly roundup. So at the bottom of that, there's this little CISO Corner. This is my little contribution to this. She does all the hard work. I get to pontificate it very much at the end here. So I got 3 things I want to share with you. And then Crystal, I'd love to get your commentary on this as well. But I would say if you're a security leader and you've been sitting with us for this hour, or excuse me, half hour, and you've gone through and you've read Crystal's reports and you've looked at the work of the threat research team, how do you begin to take action immediately to start improving your security program? So I would offer these 3 different pillars. The first is around inventory. I know that sounds really basic, but it's also really important that you know where are those MCP servers, where are those coding agents, what are the agents that have been integrated into your pipelines, what does exist in your environment? And so by creating a catalog of these, it puts you in a position that when the next piece of threat research comes out, you have something to map against. So ideally, start thinking through what is the technology you want to do so you can programmatically start pulling out a really good inventory of where these agents are and how they're integrated and the capabilities that have been extended to them. It's a tall order, but start there, and that gives you something to map against. A really important thing here is if you look at LLM Lite, this was a open source function that a lot of people integrated because it allowed you to optimize costs when you're routing requests across different LLMs. Awesome, great in practice until it's compromised. And if you don't know what exists in your environment, you're not going to be in a position to be able to respond to it accordingly. So that's number 1. Number 2 is what we said earlier about deploying real-time protections into your CI/CD pipelines. And the reason I say that is because it is the next frontier of runtime. We've seen everyone's kind of realizing, okay, we need real-time understanding what's happening in our cloud environments. The next place is going to be in the CI pipelines and, of course, the coding agents themselves. This is all where change is happening. It's where tools are being invoked. It's where action is taking place. So you need to have something that's looking at that as it's happening and working alongside you to take action to stop malicious behavior or draw attention to it if it is suspicious behavior. And the third thing here is less tactical and more strategic. And this is every security leader over the next 12 months needs to have a security strategy that is laying down the groundwork for autonomous remediation. There is no way that we can build systems that are reliant on humans that within 20 hours are ready to mitigate the next thing within a 20-hour window when the next LangFlow happens, or 10 hours when the next notebook happens. These timelines are collapsing. So we are going to be moving to a world where we are trusting agents to take action in production. We are trusting agents to revoke credentials, to shut down services, to remediate vulnerabilities. And that's kind of a tall order if you are trying to use yesteryear's frameworks and measurements. So as we prepare for the next 12 months, I use 12 months because that's Conor's, this is how much time I think we really have. Looking at how the models are advancing, what's public, what's private, where it's open source, where we're going. My assessment is we have about 12 months until we have threat actors with AI capabilities, with deep reasoning, where they can go from discovery to weaponization, chaining of exploits, and then succeeding at that. So the clock starts now. Actually, it started about a month ago. And we have about 12 months to get this in place because autonomous remediation, autonomous detection and defense is the future. And so it's upon us as leaders to lean in with courage and build the right measurements, write the right governance frameworks, and put in the right technology guardrails so that we can go do that. Crystal, anything else you want to add to this before we start to wrap up today?
Yes, for sure. Okay, so first of all, inventory. Yes, it's a tall order. Take inventory of the AI that you're using. We've been saying this about just S-bombs for a while now, right? With everything else. Do it for your AI too. But I hate to be the bearer of bad news. You also need to look at your vendors, supply chain providers. What kind of AI are they using? Do you know? Probably not, unless you have established S-bombs with them. But has it been updated in the last 6 months to see what kind of AI packages that they're deploying that's then being connected to your environment? So that's one thing. The second one I don't really need to talk about. I literally just said that. CI/CD, it's a thing. We're going to keep struggling with it until we figure it out. Fortunately, runtime detections work really well in the CI/CD pipeline. So there's that. And then finally, this third one, I could not have set this up any better if I did it myself. But we have our annual, this is the 9th annual container and cloud security usage report coming out next week. And there is a nice big section in the report that has real usage data that talks about exploitation speeds, the need for machine speed response. And this, I mean, like I said, I just couldn't have set this up any better myself. The report next week will speak exactly to this. We have already started implementing autonomous prioritization, scanning, ticketing systems, but our response to detections triggering or vulnerabilities is still very much human-based. So look out for the report next week if you want to read a little bit more about that.
So before we leave you, we've got 2 good questions in the chat here. I'm going to address them one at a time. The first is from Michael. So Michael, you were asking the question of like, we've been doing automated testing in CI/CD for a while, including these new package versions. So how do we, in practice, bring some defense towards this? So these supply chain attacks, what we're seeing here is that the developers of these open source projects And they don't necessarily have to be open source. They're just these developers who have credentials to make code changes to these tools that are getting largely integrated in CI pipelines are getting compromised. And what's happening is, as there are compromises happening in there and there are changes being made to the tool sets, that means every time they are running wherever they're deployed, that malicious action code prompt is being invoked. And so what we're seeing is like, this is why I encourage you to go to take a look at the work, the threat research team, the articles they put out about Team TCP, or PCP, excuse me. If you look at that, the articles and the blogs, they'll break down the technical details of exactly what's happening. But one of the things that is happening that I'll highlight to you is that when the agent is sitting in the pipeline and then that agent invokes malicious commands, what are these malicious commands doing? They often are scraping the working memory of the environment that the CI runner is running in and looking to dump credentials. This is a classic way of being able to move laterally, right? We've seen this everywhere. You dump credentials and then you move on to the next thing. But what are the credentials is dumping? Well, it's also dumping the credentials of other tools that are sitting in that same pipeline. And so then it's like, oh, so this is why we're seeing this chain reaction, no pun intended, of these one thing being compromised, leading to the compromise of another, leading to the compromise of another, is because a lot of these tools that are sitting on pipelines are sitting inside the same CI runners. And as one is compromised, it dumps their credentials of working memory. It says, oh, I have access to the next thing. And then they go and compromise those accounts and then move on, so on and so forth. So go read the blogs. I really encourage it. It's really good. And then there's another question from Matt here. When we think about autonomous remediation, what kind of actions could orgs realistically trust to be automated in the near future versus still requiring human approval? Cool. All right, Matt, I'm going to give you Conor's answer and I'm going to give you the CISO answer. Okay, here you go. So if you look at where the threat actors are at, what we're seeing here is that we need to start building out systems where we can start to have the same level of trust in agentic response that we have from our next generation AV provider when they deploy the next set of signatures. If we rewind the clock 10, 15 years ago, there was a time and a place where security teams would take the next set of signatures from their AV provider and they would test it and they would roll it out to make sure like didn't break this printer spooler. I mean, it's ancient history, but we used to do that. We don't do that anymore because we've built the instrumentation that we know when a vendor says, okay, this is the detection signature. These are the heuristics. These are the models that are going to find malicious action. The customer base just trusts it. That's the direction we need to get into. So that is the end state that we need to be building strategy to, is that we are building the governance structure around these agents. So we allow them to do high quality reasoning using some of the bullet points I shared earlier so that they can take proactive action, whether it's in detection response, you see a malicious action, you take a response, or adding patches. You write your own patch, you get it staged, you test it, you regression test it, and then you're rolling it out to production. So that's where I think we're going. Now, there's a slightly more conservative answer here that a CISO might bring to the table, and that is going to be the same idea, but framed slightly differently. And that's going to be, well, what is the risk tolerance to the business? And what's really important here is there's a moment for security leaders to now re-educate their peers, CTOs and VPs of engineering and the CEO, and start to say, like, this is the state of what we're defending against, and really ground the strategy in the position of the threat actor, because when we do that, the strategy for defense makes a whole lot more sense. So we don't change the direction we're going, but the starting conversation is we need to ground it in the state of the threat actor so we can truly understand our enterprise risk. And from that, we can create the right defense strategies. All right. Really, really cool. There was another question here, Crystal, which I'm going to send to you, which is from Ryan. What is the most surprising finding from your work on the usage report? So don't give away the whole thing, because we're going to release it next week. But give us a teaser. Tell us, what's the most important thing?
Oh, man. So this is my 4th year working on Sysdig's usage report. And it's been so much fun every single year digging into this data. Of course, AI is at the heart of it this year. Lots more growth. There's been a lot of maturity across a variety of different sectors within the cybersecurity fields, and that's all present there as well. I did say too, there's a lot in there about having to move to machine speed response. For a few years, we've reported on pausing, stopping, killing containers, killing at the process level when a detection triggers, and autonomously stopping crypto miners, known malware, things like that. So just to piggyback on your response just before this too, known bad is pretty easy parameter to set. Obviously, you need to be a lot more advanced to be able to autonomously stop more expert challenging vulnerabilities or exploits, what have you. But there are some very basic steps that you can take right now to start stopping crypto miners so you don't have to keep paying for the resources that they're using. So yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say for now. There'll be more coming from Sysdig over the next week though, so I highly suggest just paying attention on LinkedIn. And Sysdig will give away a little bit more than I just told you now.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. So again, thank you. This is our first go live here, our LinkedIn Live, talking about the state of the threat actor. This comes off the heels of RSA, where we had an incredible turnout from 50 people in a 30 room space. It was incredible. All of us, because we need to understand the state of the threat actor. So I encourage you to follow the Sysdig Threat Research team, follow their blogs, follow us on LinkedIn. Also, here's some of the resources that we refer to today. And also the Zero Signal podcast. This is a podcast that I host every week where we're talking about exactly this kind of conversation, but aimed at security leaders and those who are willing to trying to influence the direction and pace of security strategies across organizations. So with that, Crystal, anything else we want to leave our wonderful audience off with today?
That's all we've got. There's going to be a lot coming in the next week, so stick around, hang out with us on LinkedIn, and hopefully you can join us next week or next month. We'll see what happens in April, and we will be ready to discuss it.
Something tells me it's going to be a fun month. Fun month.
Every month is more fun than the month before.
All right. Till next time, thank you so much. And from those at Sysdig, stop watching and start defending.